give it another quarter cut, only because it's really hard to cut lengths like that really evenly versus something that's smaller. So a little something there with cutting techniques. Let me go ahead and put this over here, excuse me.
Cabbage is another one of those things that I love to have in my fridge pretty much at all times because it keeps really well. And if it ever starts to look a little brown and funky, you just cut off that little edge and like there's still so much delicious cabbage to cut into. So that's a wonderful veggie that will last a couple weeks in the fridge.
I agree. I used to keep ahead of it in my fridge. And I would just eat it raw, shaved really thin with soy sauce, fish sauce, sriracha, sesame oil, and a little bit of garlic. And I would just eat that and it filled me up. Essentially, when you're shaving down the cabbage, what you're looking for, coming close, you're looking for really thin pieces. And the thought is, when you go to eat this taco, don't want really thick pieces that are going to kind of push out of your way or they're going to fall out of the taco. You know, you're almost looking at this like how your garden hose ends up being tangled over time. You almost want the slaw to do that so that it's just not falling out the back and it's making it a little easier for you to eat. So ultimately, I'm going to keep cutting down, go through this. Go through one more thing with the knife before we actually finish up the slaw. It's a very simple recipe as far as the slaw and the tacos in general. So I think I went through this in my other video too, proper way to hold the knife. So you have your knife here. Most people want to grab it like this. And when I was in culinary school, that's how I grabbed it my freshman year. And they always tell you to choke up on it like this. Basically, the reason for that, you're creating more of a stable knife. Anything that you're holding longer is easier to manipulate in your hand, which is a cut risk, whereas I'm choking up. See, I can hold that thing. So I'm actually like bending the blade now. So it was hard for me to kind of conform to that, but what I would highly advise, if you haven't been doing that, to start doing that. It's going to help you over time. It's going to give you a lot more control over all of your cuts. Another thing I have out here, I always have a container where I can put food scraps for compost, whatnot. Just kind of, it saves me going back and forth, and you know, I don't want to do that all day. When I do it for 8 hours, it gets old really fast.
And it's definitely a little cleaner and easier if your trash can is a drawer you have to pull out or a lid you have to open every time. I'm a big fan of the salad bowl scraps as well. And I like to put them in a plastic bag, depending on what they are, in my freezer, and then you can make stock.
Yeah, well, when you're usually polluting your handles right, every time you touch it. So we have our cabbage here. I'm just going to tell you the ingredients. There's a recipe attached to this. So as far as amounts, we did a full recipe for you. I wouldn't worry about measurements. I'm just strictly going to go through the ingredients. We have fresh ground black pepper. Okay, that's going to go in there. Never buy the regular like black pepper, like it's just not the way to go. You usually want to get a coffee grinder or a separate grinder to do your black pepper. It's much different. It's not stale. You don't know how long that pepper has been hanging out in, 2 years in the factory. Who knows? We're going to go with a little bit of salt. Okay. We're going to go with a little bit of oil. You can use vegetable oil. You could use a olive oil, as long as it's not too bitter. I tend to use a 90-10 cut here. It's 90% olive oil and 10% vegetable oil. Cuts it a little bit. And then we're going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar. Not too much. And then basically, we're almost there. We to we're going to add a little bit of minced onion into this. So onion-wise, once again, you have the top of the onion, it's the one with the sprout. The one with all the threads is the bottom. You want to save the bottom for sure. So we're going to take the top off just like that. I'm going to take just an ever so slight amount of the bottom off, just barely a shave. I want this to be able to hold the onion together when I'm dicing it, would be the purpose behind that. And then through the bottom, we're cutting this onion in half. So ultimately, you end up with a half. We're going to go through a minced dice on the onion. Show you how to do that real fast. So hopefully you can see okay. So I have my onion laid down. It's all being held together by the back. We're going to come through. I can bring this up to you. You don't want to cut all the way through. You still want the whole together. Cutting through sideways carefully. Fingertips on top. So I end up with lines like that going through the onion. And then I'm going to repeat from the top to the bottom. I'm going to go through. So we went through this way, we went through that way. And then basically, so if you want a thicker dice, you're just going to spread those lines out. You want way smaller, this has to be tighter. And then we're going to come down, we're just going to cut our dice. You can ultimately see right here, that's our dice cut right there. Do a little bit here for the slaw. And we're almost done with it.
Harley, I get this question all the time. How do we prevent onion tears? Do you have any tips and tricks for us?
No, I've heard everything from trying to breathe through your mouth to some people say put bread in your mouth. Everything I've tried, nothing's quite worked. I honestly don't have anything for you there.
I find that refrigerating the onions sometimes tamp that down a bit.
It may, because we do that in catering when we're really busy. We'll clean 50 pounds of onions and we'll have them peeled out. That way we're just able to grab that onion and manipulate it in the way that you wanted it. But you still get one every now and then. We're going to add a little bit of cilantro into our slaw. You can kind of rough chop this a little. Make sure you're definitely taking your time, feeling what's comfortable for you on the knife. It's not a race. I tried that once and I lost. It wasn't very fun. It was when I first started culinary school. I was making fajitas at my house and thought I'd try to speed it up like how I saw the chefs do, and ended up having to take a half an hour break due to that one. Okay, so your slaw, like I said, it's very basic, but you will be able to see. I'm a big fan of the gloves. I don't want my hands turning purple for when I get out of here. Ultimately, I just don't want oil all over my hands. So your slaw looks like this. You can see it's ever so slightly brighter than it was. What's going on is that apple cider vinegar we put in there is starting to kind of break down that cabbage a little, and that's ultimately what you want. You want it to get a little soft, but you don't want to make it too far ahead, or it's going to get really soft and you'll lose like your crunch factor. So it's kind of an a la minute type situation. So that's our slaw. Next, we are going to work on our Chipotle Mayo. So one thing I will go into, I don't want to spend too much time on it. Invest in some cooking tools if you're going to be doing it a lot. This actually is from my house. It's like a little mini Cuisinart. They're not too expensive. I think they're like 26 bucks. I have blown one up already by overuse, but I hate chopping garlic. That's like one of my things. So whenever I'll put my herbs, shallots, garlic in here, grind them, and then go with them. It's highly useful. Highly recommend it.
They're also the perfect size for putting a single can of chickpeas in and making hummus. I have one
Exactly.
food processor as well.
Yeah, I have a more professional version too, or let's just say it's bigger. And we'll break that out when we start reaching thresholds on stuff. But for this one, pretty straightforward. I'm gonna put a little bit of garlic cloves in here. We're gonna hit it again with a little bit of black pepper, a little bit of salt, and we're gonna give it a little bit of lime juice. Cut in limes for me. There's your top, there's your bottom. I'm gonna cut both sides off. So we got 1, 2. So here we go. Got our lime. Then I'm gonna cut through the top, come down again. Ultimately, I have 6 wedges here. I'm gonna squeeze one in there. Get that juice in there. If you see a lot of seeds, you could put a strainer over there, save you from like trying to fish them out of the mayonnaise. It's always helpful. And then the best ingredient in it, in my mind, is the chipotle peppers. So this is chipotle peppers in adobo sauce. Adobo sauce is tomatoes, ground chili, sugar, vinegars, all different kinds of spices kind of cooked into that red kind of pasty. Ultimately, chipotle peppers are just jalapenos that have reached a stage of red in their color, and then they are smoked. So chipotle peppers is basically a smoked ripe jalapeno. It's the best way to describe that, or pretty much the only way.
I had no idea. Have a couple of those growing as well.
What's that?
I have a couple of those growing. I just assumed they were red jalapenos. I didn't realize peppers are very interesting that way.
Yeah. So they just smoke them down, and it matches it. It probably, I would imagine you just don't want that kind of army green color in it. Yeah. So it's going to get a little loud for a second, but ultimately I'm going to turn this on and I'm going to blend it till it's smooth. I like this processor a lot too because it goes one way and you can also go the other way. So if something gets stuck, I can reverse this way, that way, this way, that way. Really nice tool. Highly recommend it. When they start to smoke when you're using it, it means you're overusing it. That's what happened to my first one. Okay, so ultimately coming close to you. So there's your Chipotle Mayo. It's as simple as that. You're going to end up with a mayo that's still somewhat thick. You don't want it like water. So if you love lime juice and decide to put a ton in there, it may water it down. And when we get into this later, I'll show you where that may not be beneficial and where you could add the other lime in it. Ultimately, really straightforward. You're looking for a salmon color when it comes to it. I can show you that again. So then, like magic, it ends up in the squirt bottle for later. I put it in a squirt bottle because I was thinking we could do a little garnish work later. If I was doing 25, 30 tacos, you could go and or you could use a squirt bottle on. Maybe it's a little funner. Another thing to invest in, you never know. So ultimately, we have our slaw, and now we have our Chipotle Mayo. Looks like we're looking pretty good on time, so we'll go through this next one pretty in depth. Okay, to fry the fish, it's not that hard.
Can I stop you real quick? If we made Chipotle Mayo and had some left over, how long would you keep that in the fridge? Or is this just a eat once, or that then can get used for the rest of the week?
No, I mean, it could probably last weeks, I would say. I always kind of go with the notion that if I don't see it coming, try to reduce the overflow. But yeah, it's pretty solid. We do a lot of flavored mayonnaise for sandwiches and
And I was
whatnot.
about to say, perfect thing to keep and then put on your sandwiches for later in the week.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many ways to manipulate it. You could do like turkey wraps on flour tortillas, and you could take a little bit of this Chipotle Mayo, and you could whip it into cream cheese that you then spread on your lavash bread, and put your turkey down and make all your wraps. There's I don't know if you love mayonnaise, maybe you just eat it with chips. But yeah, you kind of get the basic idea of what's going on there. So when it comes to frying the fish, typically the Baja tacos, they're in a beer batter. Kind of makes sense, you know, down by the ocean, everybody loves beer typically when you're in that type of scenery. I'm doing mine with a non-alcoholic beer, mostly just because we're on campus and we tend not to bring in a lot of alcohol on campus for pretty much almost anything. I did look it up as far as if it would attribute to kind of affecting the batter, and ultimately, what I found, what's really activating the beer batter is the carbon dioxide, the bubbles, okay, and the pH levels in the beer. I think basically what's going on is the the acidity stops a lot of gluten from forming. So you're ending up with a really light batter between those bubbles trying to escape out of there, and the acidity fighting off the gluten just gives you a really light, fluffy batter. That's the best way to understand it. The hot alcohol does do a little bit, but they were also, you know, if you look at a beer that has 5% alcohol, it's a pretty minimal amount that would be affected between the two. And I did a dry run with it before we started because I didn't want any surprises. And it looked like perfectly fine to me. So there you go. uh, so that's the thing on the beer batter. You want a white fish, typically a cod. I ended up with ling cod, which is actually one of my favorite fish. So I was pretty happy about that. I think you could do it with mahi mahi. They did have Chilean sea bass, which is really expensive. I mean, that would be pretty good. But you know, but then I was thinking, really, you have so many of these kind of straightforward flavors. You know, I mean, it's probably not good to do it with like salmon or overwhelm it in that sense. So I think like a basic neutral white fish that you don't have to worry too much about drying out is what you're looking for. Another thing we have going here, so this is an induction burner. It reacts to the pan to heat it up. The biggest thing here is safety when it comes to frying anything. You can see I have that handle shooting that way. Originally, I had the board for cutting fish over there. I moved it over there before we started. It's just, to me, I don't want to be over there where that handle is, in an area where I'm doing it for the first time. So try to take as many safety measures as you can with this. Uh, that way we don't end up with any accidents. You want your oil to be a pretty consistent 350. So I would advise buying a candy thermometer, getting one of those, figuring out what it takes to kind of get that oil to that temp without large gains or losses. You know, you want a steady, you don't want an up and a down. Cast iron works good. Luckily with this burner, it goes by numbers. I don't know, I stopped at number 10, which seemed to be the good setting for me. That's the thing with the frying. We'll go back into it more. I will say one thing. The board you see down here is green. We do a color system on campus. Green represents all produce. Anything essentially that's not super hazardous. When I go to cut the fish, I'm going to use a blue. Blue, like the ocean, has been set for doing any type of seafood. Yellow is for chicken for us, red is for meat, and white is for dairy. It's a pretty good system. I have a single board at home made out of this material that I use for only like animal fish proteins. I don't put those on any of my other cutting boards. I don't want that. It's really easy for me to keep track of. That's something else I would highly recommend doing that. Before we cut the fish, why don't we go ahead and make the batter. So there's different variations on batter. I did a basic one, essentially. I don't want much confusion here as on the first time. I can give you some suggestions after. This is O'Doul's. This is a non-alcoholic beer. I think it has like 0.003. Very straightforward, and guess what? It's what they had the most of there. I couldn't figure out why. So we're going to start with our flour. I'm not using any type of special flour, just like a regular all-around white flour. Going to get that in the bowl. And then I already did the measurements. I know that this is going to end up taking the full bottle of beer. This here was 1.5 cups of flour. So you're looking at 12 ounces of flour going into a 12-ounce bottle of beer. I would say any recipes you get off the web, not to like take that for granted that those people, they got a recipe up so they know what they're doing. Because I found many a times that that's not the case. And this was a good example where I was glad I actually tested this recipe out, even though it's literally 2 ingredients they were off. And it was super thick. That's just something that's come back to haunt people every now and then, and you just want to make sure you understand, especially if you're going to do it for a cooking demonstration or you're doing it for Christmas dinner. I would always make sure to test your items. Do like a slight dry run on something you're not familiar with. I would definitely test it out because you don't want to find out the hard way. Okay, it's very simple. I just whisked the 2 items together. Usually you can salt and pepper it now. I think what I personally am going to do, I'm going to put the pepper in there, whisk it a little more, and I'm going to save the salt for when the fish is actually done. I'm only doing that for the reason that the salt kind of reacts a little bit to the carbonation and tends to want to break it down. And I don't want that. I'm trying to keep that carbonated. That ultimately is what's going to have your batter really fluffy and light. So we're going to set that aside. Here's our ling cod. Give you another little thing about this. So when you get your fish, you're always best to, well, first get some gloves on, huh? So when I buy my fish, I really like to dry it off well. Usually they'll be sitting in a little bit of its own juices, and that ends up causing it to go bad a little faster for one. It also, in most applications, I've never seen where it said, hey, you should leave your fish in all that juice because it's actually going to help you. Because it never does. And that's why it never says that, because it does nothing for you. So with that, you can see I went through. This is the ling cod. They were wrapped in these paper towels. You can see it's pretty fresh. It has like kind of a gloss to it. You can see it's not dripping juice. It's nice and dry. That's what I do. I do it with meat as well. I try to draw out the liquid. So we're going to put this on our cutting board. This piece I wanted to show you, I specifically left it. It's kind of got this white line here. That's fish silver skin. It happens on meat too. It's connective tissue. Fish, it's not so bad, but I am going to remove that. I wanted to at least give you a high detailed look at that so you know what to look for and what you want to remove. Another reason I brought this knife, typically there's fillet knives. I have a flexible knife that I use for filleting fish. For today, I think we're okay. But this one's a little thinner. It's going to help me kind of get a nice thing cut under there. You can see having that thin blade that looked like that. Now we have our piece like that. You know, it's very minimal waste, and that's what you're looking for. So we're going to take that piece off, put it in our trash can. I think I'll put our trash back here. So now ultimately we want to cut our fish into the pieces we're going to use for our tacos. Cutting basically roughly one by ones. The fish is never a perfect shape, so I think I'm going to take this tail end piece, basically cut it into 3 strips. There's 3 strips here. And this one, it's a little thicker. Ultimately, you could kind of strip off like that. You're just kind of trying to match your pieces. It's important to try to match so that they cook at the same rate of time. So we're going to go through here. Okay, so now we have enough for 3 tacos. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to dredge the fish in just basic flour. That means I'm going to take my pieces, put them in here. There's a real game we play here to not like get both our hands dirty. So typically you'll use one hand for applying anything that's dry, which would be my right. And then I'm dropping that in. We'll see if we can get them all in there, but I did put in the recipe. You don't feel like you need to crowd the fryer or the batter just to try to get it done, but this is pretty minimal amount. Okay, so ultimately I'm like this. I got this one hand that was just flour. I'm now going to remove that glove. And now I have the bowl with the fish in it. Just going to submerge them, and then I'm going to drop them in the oil very carefully. And this will be my wet hand. So we're going to take it over here. I get a little bit of this batter on there. All right. So I typically tend to like to shake a little. Try to come this way. You guys can still see me okay? Okay. So instead of just dropping it right in, I try to hold one in and get the frying started a little, and then I drop it in. It'll help with like stickage if you kind of get it started. I worked at a sushi restaurant for the Hyatt Regency in La Jolla, and I worked saute quite a bit, and the fryer was right next to me. And I would just stand there and watch these sushi chefs do this for hours with all those tempura shrimp that they use in the rolls. This was the technique, the back and forth, get it started a little, drop it in. Another reason you don't want to overcrowd is if you can't get it in fast enough. You can see probably my last piece is going to be about 40 seconds behind my first one. I can tell by the color which one that is, but ultimately that's another reason you don't want to mess around like that, you know. And you'll cool down your oil a lot faster. I mean, ultimately we're dropping something in here that is cold, so it's going to take your temperature down. Where the cast iron skillet very well was a very good suggestion by a colleague of mine that I would also recommend to use. These are pretty thick pans, so it's like anything, like an insulated bathtub. It's going to hold the heat a little better. If you're using a paper thin pan, you're going to get variations all over the place. Sometimes it won't affect you that much. Other times it could really start to give you problems. And like we said in the beginning, number one thing we're trying to do here is avoid stress. Okay, so you're going to kind of take a look at the fish. It looks like it's fine. They're floating. I'm going to turn any of them that look like they're blonde on top. We're just looking for a golden brown color. As I told you before, the mise en place is key. I already have my platter here, ready to go with the paper towels. I'm not, oh my God, I didn't do that, and now I'm running all over, just trying to get a plate so I can take my fish out, and then I'm running around something that's scalding hot, and it's just not a good situation. So I can say being prepared for me in life has never let me down. That'd be my rule for the day. Or advice, I guess you would
What
say.
oil are you frying your fish in?
So I'm actually frying it in that same
Cool.
same 90-10. Sorry, it's 90% canola oil, 10% extra virgin olive oil. That's the cut on it. That's why you're able to fry with it, because olive oil, there's smoke points to oil, meaning how hot can you get them before they compromise and they start breaking down. Peanuts, like the highest, avocado oil does okay. But when you start getting into the olive oils, it's really not a frying oil. But I also try to avoid canola, just sometimes you can't. That's, hey, that's why fried food is bad for you, right? We're almost there. The leg pot's gonna cook up pretty nice. It's gonna be flaky. Mahi would be good. It will have more texture. Don't get me wrong, you could do it with salmon. Life's not perfect. Rules are made to be broken sometimes. It's just whatever but this is the basic Baja taco, I guess you could say. So we're gonna do the fish. And then I'm going to show you how to do the tortillas. That's one thing I'm adamant about is how they're heated up. Because everybody's had a taco where you got to heat it and it breaks. And that's one of my pet peeves. So we'll go through that right after this. These are about done. I'll show you a shot. So when you drain it out, since it is a fluffy batter, give it a minute to make sure that you're not just putting a swimming pool. I've also had where I tilted it like this and the oils ran down this tongue and come out on the other side. So that's something you want to watch so you don't end up with a nice burnt wrist to take home at the end of your day. All right, so there's our fish. I'm going to get this oil out of the way because I just don't want it around me anymore. There's no use for it and it's just dangerous. I will say with oils too, if you're frying something and you haven't put anything in there yet and that oil starts to smoke a little, then your oil is too hot, and there is flash points in oils that basically it is what it says it is. It goes from oil to fire. And once that happens, obviously water's not gonna help. So you're gonna need to smother that flame. So that's where you definitely want that temperature gauge to be able to look at those things. I think we said we're gonna top it with the salt after. So I'm gonna give it a nice little bit of kosher salt. Always salt directly when it comes out, just because the batter's still kind of working in it. It tends to hold the salt on a little better. So ultimately, we just deep fried. You can see the pieces are nice and fluffy. Hey, look, it looks like beer batter.
Delicious.
Yeah, so we're almost there. So next thing is the tortilla. So the tortillas, it's gonna take a minute for this. I'm like skyrocketing this pan pretty hot because I definitely, it takes a pretty hot pan. I'm going to get rid of my cutting board here that had the fish on. Put that over here. Now, kind of while I'm waiting on that, it's a good time for me. I kind of look through what I have, what I did. I'll organize up slightly. I know I'm going to need these for final production, the slaw, the mayo. Probably not the tongs. Yeah, just kind of get yourself in order a little bit. Okay, so flour tortillas, when you got to heat them, you can heat them in a pan with absolutely no oil. You can put just an ever so slight amount of oil on them. That helps quite a bit to get them pliable. Or you could do a fire roast, which I'll show you how we do that. I think I'm just going to put a tad of oil on these. I'm going to pour just, I'm talking just a slight amount. I'm going to put that down. I'm going to coat it almost like a sandwich. I'm going to put a little more down on this one. And I'm going to use the other one, kind of helping ourselves out here. So I think we'll do about 3 tacos. Move these out of the way. See how hot our pan is. One way to test the pan is to take just a little bead of water and put it in there. If it rolls and goes away really fast and you're pretty hot, I wouldn't advise using your fingers like I do, but seems like we're always in a rush. Okay,
are your tortillas already cooked, or are you using raw tortillas?
No, they're already cooked. Basically, what I'm trying to do is get them pliable so you don't have that problem. If I just put it in there like this, and then it's going to crack in half. And it's just, ultimately, when we make enchiladas, we literally either steam or heat up each tortilla. That way, when we roll it, it doesn't crack. So when you're making, like they are, 3,000 enchiladas every week, it can be a bit of a process, but there are tricks to the trade. When it comes to the tortilla, just kind of watching it, they'll puff up a little. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of color. You can see this one, see it has a little bit of bubbles on it. Just watching for that. It's all set. Naturally, you don't want to over toast them, or then it's going to be too hard to, you're just going to end up more like a tostada. So, it's a fine line with everything. And we'll go in one more time. Oh, I forgot to show you the fire roasted. So, when we're in a hurry, the other way you can do it, see if you can hear me, we'll do ours on an open flame, and it has like the same technique. This is mostly how the guys do it because they're in a hurry. They don't want theirs cracking. We'll just throw it over an open burner like this. You can see it's kind of starting to soften up. Actually, it's probably not advisable. I'm not going to sit there and tell you to do it like this unless you have some tongs. But it is one way, and it does give a little bit of a toast to the tortilla. You can see now, like it's soft. It's got a little flavor. I'll throw this one in the middle. I also didn't have to use any oil. So if you're like really watching your oil content like I am, then that's a more healthy way to go, unless you want to get into the argument about the charring and spend all day. But for now, we will keep moving forward. All right, so it's that quick. 3 tortillas done. When I do it at home, I do enough for my wife that I know, okay, well, we're going to eat these, and I stop. And then if we want more, I just go back and do more. It's just that easy. So construction of the taco, we got the squirt bottle. We're probably going to do it, well, We could do them on the cutting board and transfer them over to the plate. Let's do that. It's a nice dry towel. A little bit of moisture from the tortillas. So I'm going to strictly, for starters, move that out of the way so you can see. I'm going to put a little bit of Chipotle down first. Okay. And I'm going to put my fish for my tacos. My 2 pieces. Grab those. You can see the batter holds up well. You could put flavors in your flour. You could put smoked paprika, cumin. There's a lot of different things you could add to the flour as long as it's not a liquid. Any dry seasonings, like something you love, would go great. It would also change the structure of the batter. If you were going to use real beer, you could use a dark lager. It's going to give it a richer flavor. I think personally here, for what we're doing, it doesn't really need that. But if you're in an Irish pub, that's why they're using Guinness. So I'm going to go with a little bit more of the mayo. Okay. And then I'm going to get a glove on because I don't want to touch that slaw that's releasing all its dye and oil. And we're just going to toss it again. As far as the slaw, you can see it's a little softer now, and that's what I was saying. You want to do it ahead, but you don't want to do it ahead too much, or it's just going to end up like too much. But you can see, and it's thin, so it's not going to really fall all over the place. I can just strictly come in. I know it's not going to fall out of the taco. We're just going to top off. Okay, so we're almost there. We have our tacos there. Now, I think we'll finish them with a little bit of lime juice, so you still have those wedges, so you'll go through, top them off a little bit. And then we're going to arrange on the plate. You can see I'm able to grab them. They're not cracking. They're not breaking. That's something that really bothers me. As you probably have
There's
figured
nothing
out.
worse than a cracked tortilla.
Exactly. It's like who wants that? You could see how they're laying out. There is the possibility you could skewer them a little bit to hold them together if you want to be real fancy. I have these bamboo toothpicks. See what it does. I haven't actually really tried it, but
And speaking of real fancy, there's just something about a rectangular plate that just always looks just a little more put together. So I love that you're bringing that out. I don't know what it is, but I love using different plate size shapes.
Yeah, I'm easy. So you can see if I put some skewers now, it looks like perfect, right? So we have about 8 minutes, so that's really good. Somehow I'm good with time. I guess it's just something I was born with. So we're going to garnish up. So it's like, what do I have here that I can garnish with? Well, first, this mayo. I know I can make it look pretty cool with this just by doing some dots that stagger down into different shapes. Give it a little tap, set them up. All right, so we have that, and then maybe I'll mess around. At this point, this is what really got me into cooking, is more like the artistry behind it. I really liked how you can make something look so amazing.
You eat with your eyes.
Exactly. So, when I first started, my main goal was I was attempting to, and did to an extent, work for, some of the best restaurants where this was just the name of the game. Now, this kind of garnishing is kind of amateur, but we're just kind of giving you an overview of what you can do. Do a little bit of lime right there. I think I brought some radish. Let's see here. Yeah, maybe it's still bit.
And it may seem like something that belongs in a restaurant, but I feel like, especially now while we're cooking at home and maybe feeling a little tired, just adding some garnish, taking a minute or two to think about your plating really makes the home cooked meals feel a little fancier, a little more special, and we could all use that for a lunch, for dinner. So I love just spending a little extra time, if you have it, to add that little TLC to it.
I agree. It's just taking it to the next level. You'd be surprised. People like foods that brings a smile to their face. Just trying to work on your skill level when it comes to it. So we can go like that, and then I still have some cilantro down here, so I could take a couple sprigs, take that off. Maybe bring it in. So ultimately, it's something you could serve in a restaurant, no problem. Looks like, let me see how far I can get it. Looks like that, right?
Looks amazing. It's beautiful. Wow.
So ultimately, what you're looking at is, well, why would I use green cabbage? Well, you want the color. The thing about cooking, a lot of it's common sense and a lot of it's knowing your techniques. I think I spoke about this before, where you got to be really organized and you have to understand the basic techniques. And once you really have those techniques down, from sauteing to today frying, that's going to save you a lot of drama when it comes to the kitchen. And do research. When I was remodeling my place, I just watched hours and hours on videos of how to do something, and then I took the best of all those videos and then I stepped in and did it. And it was still a little scary, but ultimately everything worked out just fine. And even if you make mistakes, that's when you're going to learn the most.
Definitely.
It's not going to be when you get it right, like the first time. So something to keep in mind. And just even for me, we did this a couple of months ago. I did what I thought was a pretty basic fried rice. And a lot of it's like, okay, we're in this area. I'm not used to this area. I'm on a mobile burner. So I held back a little bit. It was a good demo, but then when I came into this one, it's like, yeah, let's move it up a little and start challenging ourselves a little more and do some like frying and whatnot, and really start like advancing it. So that's the advice I would give you in cooking and in life.
Absolutely. Well, I am officially hungry. It looks beautiful. I also want to note that red cabbage, like, not only does it pop off with color, but red is a really great color to just incorporate into our diets. We don't eat those purples as much, and that's really good for our brain and heart health. People tend to think berries, antioxidants, but the red cabbage, the red onions, they bring that also to the table. So that's really nice to switch up your different colors in your meals. It looks pretty, and then it also gives you a little more phytonutrients to just fill out those missing minerals and other great things that come from eating fresh veggies. Harley, if we want this recipe, do you have a copy, or could you make one that I could share out with the class?
Of course. So let me talk to Danielle. I know Danielle's got the copy. I already did it. In fact, I had it up here just in case. Always like in insurance myself. But yeah, we have the total recipe here. It starts with the slaw, starts with the Chipotle Mayo, goes into the batter and the fish, ends with the tortillas. Very just like we did. I didn't vary it all from this recipe. That gets tempting to me sometimes, but I didn't. That way you're going to end up getting the same product you saw here. And if you follow the steps and really make sure you're not crowding yourself. Take your time, and you should end up with a plate that looks just like that.
Well, and I think that also goes back to finding your comfort level. Try out those new recipes, get the hang of it, and then start tweaking. Add different spices into your powders, add different garnishes. Yeah, it's always just a stepping stone to whatever your imagination can throw at a tortilla, which is a lot.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be amazed.
Well, thank you so much, Harley. Does anyone have any last minute questions? I just want to say thank you all for showing up. I love these collaborations with FNBS and Campus Dining. I always get very inspired and very hungry after these, so I just really appreciate it. And I will be definitely making this recipe sometime very soon.
Okay. Yeah, any questions, even if it's not related to what we did here today, it doesn't matter to me. Tell you whatever I know and whatever I don't know.
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. This is my first event that of this kind, and Mallory was so kind to invite me, and it was just wonderful, so inspirational. I'll definitely try that recipe at home. I'm actually really, really hungry for tacos right now. So
I think we all are.
Yeah. So just thank you so much, and thank you, Mallory, for inviting me. It was wonderful.
Yes, you're welcome.
Any other questions for Harley? Otherwise, I want to wish everyone a happy Friday. I hope our bellies are full of tacos at some point in the future. And again, we'll be doing more of these, and this is just wonderful inspiration.
Great. Well, everybody stay safe. Almost there.
Almost. Have a great Friday, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.